All right. So the other thing that we did last week, as well as simple file writer, was we did this writing array objects to file. And basically what we did here is we said, let's say that we have a point array. So we have all these new points, 3, 4, 5, 10, 1, -1, 2, 4. And let's create a file called points.txt and loop through that array and go through basically the whole array and print the points that were not null. Okay, so the way we did that is, remember, we printed X on its own line and then we printed Y on its own line. And that gave us this points.txt file that looks like this. So what we're going to do right now is see if we can read that file and basically refill the array that we have. Okay? Or refill a different point array with those points. All right. So I'm going to close this guy and go over here and create another new file, a new class. Now again, make sure that it's files up here or whatever project you made your stuff in, otherwise it won't find the points.txt file that we're looking for. But now what we're doing is reading array objects from a file, and we want that to have a main method. And I'll finish that because I think it's easier for you guys to read it from here than it is from the dialog. Everybody good? Okay, so the idea here is that we're going to have a point array again, and let's just call it, points. And really there's kind of two ways of doing this. If we needed to be very precise about how many points we need in this array, what we would do is we would read this file, determine how many points are on the file, and use that number to set the size of the array. Okay? We don't necessarily need to be that precise. Okay? We're going to assume that there are no more than 10 points on the file. Now we can look at the file and say like, oh yeah, there's 4 points on there. Okay? But generally when you're writing a program, you're making a decision to say like, either I have to be very precise, I have to know how much there are, or I have to just say, well, I know there's not going to be more than 100 points on the file, so I'll just make my array 100 big. Okay? And we're saying right now, by doing this, that we are assuming there are not going to be more than 10 point objects on the file that we're going to read. Okay? So I just want to kind of point out that what we're doing here is we're creating 10 spots where points could go. So we have index 0, and right now index 0 is null. Right? We have index 1, which is null. We have index 2, which is null. And that is going to keep going, right, until we get to what index? What's my last index of points? So if we have 10 elements, what's my last index? I get 0 through 9, right? So index 9 is also null. So all of these are null, and now what we're going to do is we're going to try to open a file so that we can fill in these null spots with whatever data comes from my points.txt file. Does that make sense? So we're going to try to make a file, okay, and I'm just going to call it point file. So that's my new file that is this up here. So this file up here is called points.txt. So that goes in quotes. And then I'm going to create a scanner just like we did a second ago. Okay, I'm just going to call that point reader. and that's a new scanner that's reading the point file. Okay? Before I forget, I'm going to go point reader.close. Right? And when I did that, it, like, Eclipse automatically added this import because it's saying basically like, oh, the only type of scanner that you can close like that is this one that comes from java.util. So it figures that out for me. Okay? So I also want to import point. I also want to import file. So I'm just going to do again Control-Shift-O. Java.io.file is the one I want. Okay? And now if you look up here, I have 3 different imports: point, file, and scanner. Okay? So let's get rid of this error right here. Okay? And the way we do that is by catching the thing that the thing that could go wrong when I'm trying to open up this scanner. So again, that's just file not found, exception. And I'm just going to print out the file wasn't found. And then import file not found, exception. Okay, so now that we have this file and we're connecting to it with a scanner, what we want to do is basically read all of the points off of the points file and add the points onto the points array. Okay, and again, what you guys are going to do to like kind of test that you understood this is you're going to be reading contacts off of the contacts file that you created and adding them to the array in that project. Okay, so let's talk about just a couple things here. When we're writing this program, like, we technically can look over here and say, oh, there's that many points, but we should write it as if we don't know. Okay? What we do know is that each point should have what? How do you break down a point? What's a point made up of? An x and a y, right? So we're going to go ahead and say that we're going to need an int for x and y. Okay? These make up each point. All right? And we might want to add some stuff in there as well, but when we don't know how many lines we're going to be reading off the file, we're going to basically loop through the whole file. All right? So just like we looped through the array to write it, we're going to loop through the file to figure out, to like read each line. Okay? So we're going to go while, and then the way that we do this is we go point reader dot Hasnext. Right? So the Hasnext method tells us true or false that there's something on the file that we should be reading. Okay? So that's not good English, but hopefully you guys can understand. Hasnext tells us true or false, there's another line. Okay? So false means there are no more lines. True means there's another line to read. And what we're going to assume is that when there's one line to read, that's x, and that there should be another line to read after that, and that's going to be y. Okay? So we're going to go x equals point reader dot next int. Okay? So that right there, if we're looking at the file, is going to read the 3 and make x equal 3. Okay? So what do I want to do next? The same thing for y. So I'm going to go y equals point reader dot next int. That's going to make 4 equal to y, or y equal to 4, I should say. Okay? And now that I have an X and a Y, what do I want to do with those? Put them together and make a point. Okay, so now I'm going to go points at, and I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to go 0 equals a new point, X and Y. All right. So we're going to make a change in here, but I want to just kind of trace through the code a little bit so that you guys get an idea of what's going on here. Okay, so we have this scanner that's connecting to this file over here. The file starts with basically the cursor right here before the 3. And what we're doing right here is saying, is there a line to read? If point reader has next line, basically, has another thing. So does it have something for me to read? Yeah, I should be reading the 3, right? So I'm going to go in here, get X to equal 3, get Y to equal 4, and then make a new point with 3, 4 at points sub 0. So up here, basically what's happening is this is becoming a new point, 3, 4. Okay? That's the end of the loop, so we go back up and check the condition again. Bless you, point reader dot has next. Well, right now the cursor is like right there. So does it have another line to read? Yeah. So then we're going to get X equals 5 and Y equals what? 10. And then points at 0 is going to be a new point 5, 10. So now I'm changing this to be a new point 5, 10. Is that what I want to do? No, right? I want this thing to be 3, 4. Right? And I want this guy to be a new point 5, 10. Is this making sense? All right? So I have to change something in here so that I'm not always creating points 0. What should I change? I should make another variable, right? That I can say this thing is going to change as well. It's not always going to be points 0. It's going to be point 0, then 1, then 2, for as many points as I have. Okay? So what do I want to call that? Index is a good name. All right? So let's go back up here where we declared X and Y, and let's go ahead and add in another int. Let's call it index. Let's set that index equal to 0. That's a good place to start. And then down here, right, we're going to change that 0 to index. And after I create that point, we're going to change index to be equal to what it was plus 1. So index equals index plus 1. And now we should be reading all of the points on the file. Okay? So this one up here is going to end up being a new point 1, -1. Right? And we're going to have index 3 as a new point, 2, 4. All right? And when we get to the point where we're at line 9, point reader dot has next is going to be false. So it's going to say, nope, there's no more data on the file. And then we're going to close the point reader, and we're going to have all of our points in that array. All right? So the connection that you guys want to make is that we can do the same thing for contacts, except that contacts are not reading ints, okay? They're reading first name, last name, phone, and email, and then you're creating a new contact in the array from that.